Welcome to my Tech Talk.
Today we're tackling something that can feel pretty complex. The AWS Certified DevOps Engineer Professional Exam. DOP-C02, that's the one.
It definitely can feel overwhelming. I mean, AWS certifications, there are so many. And the professional level, it's serious stuff.
Exactly. So think of this as your focused guide. We've gone through a bunch of material, YouTube guides, personal stories, official AWS docs, even broader DevOps roadmaps to really pull out what you need to know.
Yeah, we're aiming to cut through the noise. So whether you're chasing a promotion, want to prove your AWS DevOps skills, or just, understand this landscape better.
You're in the right place. Our mission is pretty simple. Get the critical info on the DOP-C02, make it clear, and give you some actionable takeaways.
And we got some good sources. We looked at CertQueen guides and Technical Help Desk 911. They had lots on exam details, practice questions, that kind of thing.
Right, and Thoughtful Techie Cloud gave a nice high-level view. Plus, Damian Burks shared his own study journey, which is always helpful.
Definitely. We also have an AWS ramp-up guide, Programming with Mosh for the bigger picture, and that AWS blog post announcing the updated exams. So a good mix.
Okay, let's dive in. The exam itself, AWS Certified DevOps Engineer Professional, DOP-C02.
Got it.
And the first thing that jumps out is the time. 180 minutes. 3 full hours.
Wow, yeah. That's quite the marathon. I think Thoughtful Techie called it a mental marathon, which sounds about right.
It really does. You need focus for that long.
Absolutely. It's not just knowing the stuff, it's managing that time and keeping your concentration.
And speaking of commitment, it costs $300 to sit the exam.
Right. Which, underlines why you want to be properly prepared. It's an investment.
Definitely an investment in your career. You want that path.
Exactly. Make that $300 count.
So during those 3 hours, you'll face 75 questions. It's a mix, multiple choice, and multiple response.
Okay, 75. And didn't one of the sources mention something about unscored questions?
Yeah. Thoughtful Techie pointed out that 10 of those 75 are actually unscored. They're for AWS's research.
Ah, but you don't know which 10, right?
Exactly. So you have to treat every single question like it counts towards your score. No skipping.
Good point. Gotta give every question your best shot.
The score you're aiming for is 750. That's on a scale of 100 to 1,000.
750, okay, so a pretty high bar.
It is. And how you take it, you've got options. Pearson VUE testing centers, or you can do it online with proctoring. CertQueen and the AWS blog both confirm that.
That flexibility is nice. Makes it accessible wherever you are. And languages too, right?
Yep. English, Japanese, Korean, and simplified Chinese. Also mentioned by CertQueen in the blog.
Good to know.
All right, let's get into the meat of it, what's actually on the exam. The domains. There are 6 main areas.
And they're not all weighted equally. I remember seeing that.
Correct. Domain 1, SDLC Automation, is the biggest hitter at 22%. That's huge.
22%. Okay, so automating the whole software development lifecycle, that's clearly priority number 1. Pipelines, deployments, the whole shebang. Absolutely. Then you've got domain 2, configuration management and infrastructure as code, or IAC. That's 17%.
Right, managing infrastructure as code.
Yeah.
Think CloudFormation, maybe Terraform concepts, ensuring consistency.
Exactly. Domain 3 is resilient cloud solutions, weighing in at 15%. This is all about building systems that can handle failures.
Fault tolerance, high availability, disaster recovery.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Precisely, making sure things stay up and running or recover quickly. Then also at 15% is domain 4, monitoring and logging.
Can't run systems without seeing what's going on. CloudWatch logs, metrics, critical for operations.
Couldn't agree more. Next up, domain 5 is incident and event response at 14%. A little less weight, but still important.
So how you handle things when they go wrong. Security events, operational issues.
Yep, preparing for them, responding effectively. And finally, domain 6 is security and compliance, back up to 17%.
Same weight as IAC. That makes sense. Security isn't optional in DevOps. It's woven in everywhere.
Totally. And it's interesting how the structure changed a bit from the older version. That AWS blog mentioned this.
Oh, yeah. What changed?
Well, stuff like policies and standards automation isn't its own domain anymore. It's kind of spread out now, integrated into domains 2, 3, 4, and 6.
Ah, okay. So automation for governance and standards is now seen as part of configuration, resilience, monitoring, and security.
That makes sense, actually. More holistic.
Yeah, I thought so too. And things like high availability and disaster recovery, they're now clearly parked under Domain 3, resilient cloud solutions.
Good clarification. And wasn't there something new mentioned as well? Data schemes?
Right. The blog specifically called out normalization of data schemes being in scope now. So ensuring data looks consistent across different systems.
Which is super important when you've got data flowing between lots of microservices or different AWS services, right, for analysis and management.
Exactly. Consistency is key. Okay, so given all that,
Yeah.
who is this exam really for?
Well, the sources like Thoughtful Techie and the official blog were pretty clear.
Hmm.
You need experience. They suggest at least 2 years, hands-on, with AWS. Yeah, this is definitely not an entry-level cert. The professional name really means something here.
Absolutely. Damian Burks really hammered this home, too, in his experience video. He stressed the need for real-world practice.
And having some coding background helps too, doesn't it? Especially for the automation and IAC parts.
Oh, for sure. Understanding code makes understanding pipelines and CloudFormation templates much easier. So, the target audience.
Cloud architects, obviously DevOps engineers, consultants, maybe software developers moving into cloud roles, systems admins working heavily with AWS.
Sounds right. And it's often seen as the next step after an associate cert, like the developer associate.
Yeah, that seems like a common path. Build that foundation first.
Damian definitely recommended having those associate certs and solid experience before diving into this one. It tests application of knowledge, not just recall.
So what skills are you actually proving when you pass? What does it validate?
Good question. Thoughtful Techie and Damian laid this out pretty well. It shows deep technical skill in provisioning, operating, and managing distributed apps on AWS.
So not just knowing about the services, but how to use them effectively in complex setups.
Exactly. It also validates your ability to implement and manage CI/CD continuous deliver systems and methods, core DevOps stuff.
Right, and implementing and automating security controls, governance, compliance checks. That's a big one too.
Huge. Security baked in, not bolted on. Plus, defining and deploying monitoring, metrics, logging systems.
Proving you can keep an eye on things, troubleshoot effectively.
And building systems that are highly available, scalable, and even self-healing. Designing for resilience.
That self-healing aspect is key for modern cloud apps.
Totally. And finally, designing, managing, maintaining tools to automate operational processes. Basically, automating yourself out of manual tasks where possible.
Makes sense. Now, just as important as knowing what's in scope is knowing what's out. Thoughtful Techie had some helpful pointers there.
Oh, good, because you don't want to waste time studying the wrong things.
Exactly. So deep dive networking isn't really the focus. Things like complex routing algorithms, advanced failover techniques, probably not necessary.
Okay, good to know. Focus on the core DevOps networking needs within AWS, but maybe not CCIE level stuff.
Right. Also, giving super granular code level security advice to developers isn't expected.
So understand security principles and AWS security services, but you're not expected to be a deep application security expert.
Seems like it. Same for deep database design, querying, and performance optimization. That's more of a database specialty.
Got it. And full stack application development itself is also out of scope.
Right. The focus is on deploying, managing, and operating the applications and infrastructure, not necessarily writing the entire application code.
That clarifies the boundaries quite nicely.
Oh.
Helps focus the study efforts.
Definitely. Which brings us to preparation strategies. How do you actually get ready for this beast?
This is crucial. Lots of sources had tips here. Cert Queen, Thoughtful Techie, Damian, the Ramp-Up Guide.
First step seems obvious, but essential. Really understand the exam format, the timing, those domain weightings we talked about. Get the official overview.
Absolutely. Know the rules of the game before you play.
Then you got to master those domains. SDLC Automation, IAC Resilience Security. Really dig in.
And don't study in a vacuum. Engaging with AWS community, like forums, can be really helpful. See what others are saying, ask questions.
Good point. And practice exam questions. Get used to the style, the phrasing.
Yeah, familiarity breeds confidence. And Thoughtful Techie had a great pro tip. Download and read the official AWS exam guide thoroughly.
Cannot stress that enough. The exam guide is your blueprint. It tells you exactly what AWS expects you to know.
Consider it required reading. Don't skip it.
AWS also offers free resources, right? The blog mentions Skill Builder.
Yes. Free digital training, official practice question sets on Skill Builder. Definitely leverage those. They come straight from the source.
And if you prefer a classroom setting, the blog and the Ramp-Up Guide mention those options too, though they usually cost money.
Right. Depends on your learning style and budget. But those free Skill Builder resources are a fantastic starting point.
Also on Skill Builder is the official practice exam. It costs something, I think, but it simulates the real thing.
Probably worth the investment to get a realistic feel for the timing and difficulty before the actual exam day. Thoughtful Techie also highlighted the free exam prep standard course and the official practice question set again.
So plenty of official AWS material to get started with.
Definitely. But sometimes third-party resources can help too. Damien mentioned Stefan Merrick's Udemy course.
Right, and the tutorials, dojo, cheat sheets, and practice exams, he found those useful.
Yeah, sometimes a different perspective or explanation clicks better. So mixing official and well-regarded third-party stuff can be a good strategy.
And that AWS ramp-up guide for DevOps engineers sounded incredibly useful. It breaks things down logically.
It really does. Fundamentals, specific areas like .NET development, cloud design, governance, monitoring, config management, security.
Yeah.
It lays out a learning path.
Super helpful for structuring your study. It even mentioned peer learning resources.
And I saw it listed in AWS Power Hour for the Associate DevOps exam prep.
Yeah, even though we're talking pro, reinforcing those foundational associate concepts probably isn't a bad idea.
Agreed. A strong foundation makes building the taller structure much easier.
Okay, let's zoom back into those domains. Based on the sources, especially those practice questions, what services pop up constantly? For SDLC automation.
Oh, the code suite, definitely. AWS Code Commit, Code Pipeline, Code Build, Code Deploy. They were all over the practice questions from Cert Queen and Tech Help Desk.
Makes sense. You need to know how they fit together, how triggers work, like a code commit push starting a pipeline.
Exactly. And deployment strategies too. Damien mentioned this blue-green rolling deployments. You need to understand those patterns using Code Deploy.
Absolutely. How about configuration management and IAC?
Cloud formation is king here. Understanding templates, stack sets, drift detection, and AWS Service Catalog came up in a Cert Queen question too for enforcing standards.
Right. Using IAC not just to provision, but also to govern.
Precisely. For resilient cloud solutions, it's about architecture. Multi-AZ designs are fundamental. Even if not explicitly named, the scenarios imply needing fault tolerance.
Understanding availability zones, regions, and how to build across them is key. Designing for failure.
Definitely. Monitoring and logging, it's all about CloudWatch.
CloudWatch logs, metrics, alarms, logs, insights for querying, and using SNS for notifications. Saw lots of practice questions touching on these.
Yep. Got to know how to get data out, analyze it, and react to it.
Incident and event response often ties into that. Setting up notifications for security events, automating responses.
Using services, perhaps like EventBridge, to trigger actions based on events.
Good point, since security and compliance.
AWS Config seems huge here. Technical Help Desk had examples using it for checking resource compliance, like ensuring tags exist, and even triggering remediation with Systems Manager automation.
Right, automated compliance checks and fixes. And basic IAM best practices are always foundational. Roles, policies, least privilege.
Absolutely critical. You can't talk AWS security without solid IAM knowledge.
Maybe we can touch on a few specific scenarios from those practice questions just to illustrate.
Good idea. Like that Cert Queen one using Service Catalog to enforce tagging and also limit weaker regions users could deploy resources in.
Yeah, that's a great example of using IAC for governance. Combines domain 2 and 6.
And troubleshooting code pipeline triggers, maybe involving EventBridge rules that spans SDLC automation and event response.
Or automating email alerts for things happening in an EKS cluster using CloudWatch logs feeding into a Lambda function. That's monitoring meets serverless.
Definitely shows the integration. Technical Help Desk had one about making sure EBS volumes always get tagged using AWS config rules and Systems Manager automation documents to fix untagged ones.
Again, config for compliance, SSM for automated remediation. Very practical.
And Cert Queen had a scenario about handling instance launch failures within an auto-scaling group using lifecycle hooks to trigger an SNS notification. That hits resilience and incident response.
These examples really show it's not just knowing what a service does, but how you combine them to solve real-world DevOps problems.
Exactly. It's about the integration and the practical application.
Now, stepping back for a moment. Programming with Mosh's DevOps roadmap, it gives a wider view, right?
Yeah, it puts the AWS skills in context. It covers the whole landscape. Linux, networking basics, Git for source control.
Programming Python being a popular choice in DevOps.
Cloud providers, obviously AWS is our focus here, but understanding the concept. Containerization like Docker, CI/CD tools like Jenkins,
Orchestration like Kubernetes, configuration management like Ansible, IAC like Terraform.
and monitoring logging beyond just CloudWatch like Prometheus and Grafana. The DOP-C02 tests the AWS way of doing these things, but that roadmap shows the broader skills involved.
It's good context to have. Shows where the certification fits in a larger skill set.
Definitely.
And Damien Burke's personal take was really grounded. He found the exam tough.
He really emphasized getting those associate certs and practical experience first, didn't he?
He did. His 60-day plan sounded intense. Video courses like Stefan Marek's, plus lots of practice with tutorials, dojo materials.
A focused approach. He also listed specific services he thought were crucial.
Yeah, that was helpful. CloudFormation, the Code Suite, Systems Manager, API Gateway, Lambda, Kinesis, Inspector for Security Scans, Organizations, and Control Tower for Governance, Guard Duty. Quite a list.
Covers a lot of ground, but aligns well with the domains we discussed. Automation, IAC, Ops, Security, Governance.
He also stressed doing practice exams under timed conditions, getting that pacing right.
And using process of elimination on tricky questions. Standard test-taking skills, but vital here.
And his final advice, don't underestimate being well-rested and hydrated.
Simple advice, but makes a huge difference on a long, draining exam like this. Don't pull an all-nighter beforehand.
Good life advice, really. Okay,
Yeah.
nearly there. Just wanted to circle back to that AWS blog post about the updated exam, DOP-C02.
Right, the one that's been live since March 2023.
Key takeaway. Nothing was actually removed from the previous version. The content was just reordered.
Reordered to align better with the AWS well-architected framework, wasn't it?
Exactly. Which makes sense. That framework covers best practices for security, performance, resilience, operational excellence, cost optimization. The exam reflects those pillars.
So understanding well-architected principles is probably helpful context for studying.
I would think so, and the blog confirmed those shifts we mentioned. Security stuff mostly now in Domain 6, HADR firmly in Domain 3, resilient solutions.
Good to keep those updated boundaries in mind when planning your study time across the domains.
Definitely. So wrapping it all up, AWS Certified DevOps Engineer Professional, it's a serious exam.
No doubt about it. Professional level requires broad and deep knowledge, plus significant hands-on experience.
Preparation has to be strategic. Use those official AWS resources exam guide, skill builder, practice tests, maybe supplement with trusted third-party stuff if it helps you.
And hopefully this deep dive has given you a solid starting point, a clearer picture of what's involved.
We really hope so. The next step for you listening is probably to grab that official exam guide, look at the domains, see where your strengths and weaknesses lie, and start building your own study plan.
Remember, it's not just about passing an exam. It's about mastering the skills that make you a really effective DevOps professional on AWS. The learning process itself is valuable.
Well said. So here's a final thought for you to mull over as you plan your prep. Thinking about all these domains, SDLC automation, IAC, resilience, monitoring, security, which specific area feels like it might be your biggest challenge? And more importantly, what steps are you going to take starting now to tackle it head on?
That's a great question for self-reflection. Good luck to everyone preparing.